Dividing a decimal by a whole number is exactly the same as dividing a whole number by whole number. The only difference is needing to place the decimal in the quotient. In 5th grade, we are to the point where we will no longer be using remainders when we are doing long division. We will go out 3 decimal places, and then we will round to the nearest hundredth, because in 5th grade, we only need to divide to the hundredths place. To begin, if we have a problem like 4,812 and 17 hundredths, the first thing we do is look and see that there's a decimal. Then we place that decimal straight up above it in the quotient. So I would place my decimal right here. Now I follow all the same steps that I take to divide normally. First, I have to see if 28 can go into the number 4, but it can't. So I have to move to 48. And I realize that 28 can go into 48 one time. So above the 8 in 48, I write the number 1 because 28 goes into 48 one time. Now my next step is to multiply. I multiply 1 times 28. That answer is 28, so I write it down below, right here. Now I need to subtract. The next thing I do, since I've written down my difference, is to bring down. I have to bring down this 1. Now I repeat my steps. 28 goes in to 201 7 times. So I have to multiply. I write down the 7. Now I multiply the 28 times 7, and I get 196. I write it down below. Now I subtract. But as I'm looking to subtract, I cannot take 6 away from 1. So I have to move to the next number and see if I can borrow from that number. I cannot take 9 away from 0, so I still cannot borrow from 0. So I move to my next number. I can take 1 away from 2. So 2 is the first largest number on top that we come to that is greater than the number below it. So I can borrow. So I borrow 1 from the 2, and the 2 becomes 1. I give that to the 0, and the 0 becomes a 10. I can now borrow from the 10. I borrow from the 10, and the 10 becomes a 9. I give my 10 to the 1, and my 1 is now 11. I can now take 6 away from 11, which leaves me with 5. The next thing I do is I have to bring down my next number. Now I see how many times that 28 can go into 52. It can only go one time, so I write it down. Now I multiply. 1 times 28 is 28, and I write down 28. Now my next step is to subtract. I cannot take 8 away from 2, so I have to go and borrow. I can take 2 from 5, so I'm going to borrow from the 5. 5 becomes a 4, and I give my 10 to the 2, which is now a 12. 12 minus 8 is 4. 4 minus 2 is 2. So I have my difference. Now I have to bring down. Now I have to see how many times 28 can go into 241. It can go 8 times. And that is 224. Now I have to subtract. I cannot take 4 away from 1, so I have to move to the next number. I can take 2 away from 4, so I am going to borrow from the 4. 4 will become 3. Now I give 110 to the 1, and I now have 11 minus 4. 11 minus 4 equals 7. 3 minus 2 equals 1. I am not done yet. Now I have to bring down. I bring down my 7. Now I need to see how many times 28 can go into 177. That can go in 6 times. So now I multiply. 6 times 28 equals 168. And I write that down. Next step, subtract. I cannot take 8 away from 7, so I need to see if I can borrow from the next number. I can take 6 away from 7, so I can borrow from the 7. The 7 becomes a 6. I give a 10 to the 7, and now I have 17 minus 8, which is 9. Now I need to go out to 3 decimal places. So I have to add a 0. Then I have to bring down my 0. Now I need to see how many times 28 can go into 90. And that can go 3 times. So at the top I write a 3. I can multiply, and that comes down to 84. I do not need to finish subtracting. I can if I would like. So I'll go ahead and subtract, and it leaves me with a 6. This is not a remainder, but we are stopping there because at the beginning, I said we would go to 3 decimal places, and then we needed to round the 3 decimal places to the nearest hundredth. My answer currently is 171 and 863 thousandths. We're going to round to the nearest hundredth. In order to round, I look to the number to the right. This number is less than 5. If the number is less than 5, then the number we're rounding stays the same. So my final quotient is 171 and 8600.